Hello and welcome to the Rave Waves Eye on the Book Show. March is Women's Month. It commemorates and encourages the study, observation, and celebration of the vital roles of women in American history. To all the women who sacrifice daily and make enormous contributions to our families, communities, and our country, thank you. I'm your host, HARRIS-BURKES, broadcasting live from Dallas, Texas. Today's show is being sponsored by Cherries, a war novel by author John Lasky. I love that book. If you would like to know how to get your own commercial to air during one of our shows, just visit the Rave Waves tab on the RRBC website for information. It's a fantastic way to promote your books. Joining us today from Oak Park, Michigan is Shirley Harris Slaughter, author of today's feature title, Joyce Winifred, HARRIS-BURKES, How I Remember My Mama. Shirley is also a very active member in RRBC. Listeners, if you have any questions or comments for Shirley, I will open the floor for those questions and comments throughout the show. Your mics will remain muted until that time. I ask that you please give a little wave of your hand if you'd like to be recognized. At that time, you'll be asked to unmute your mic. You may also access the chat function located at the bottom of your screen to type in questions and comments to each other and to us. Thank you for joining our show today, Shirley. We're so looking forward to learning more about this book and your mama.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So let's jump right in. So Shirley, what made you decide to write this short memoir about your mama?
Well, when Nani did the anthology for, the IRBC members, and they were putting all of their mothers in, and I missed out on that. That sort of gave me the push to do something, because the opportunity presented itself and I almost let it pass me by. But I had always wanted to do something. So I took that to go ahead and try to do something for her, for my mother.
Wow, I think that's an outstanding reason to be able to do it, and yours gets to be a standalone. So I found your book cover is stunning and depicts an absolutely beautiful woman. What makes that particular picture so special?
Well, it's been in the family for years, and it was on the wall all while I was growing up. And I just looked at it periodically, didn't pay much attention to it because you don't, you see it and then you know it's your mom and you go on with your life. And then one day, after my mother died, my sister stole the picture, took it back to North Carolina with, and it stayed there. And then around 2005, I went to North Carolina to visit her, and I found it in the drawer, and half the top of it was torn, where her kids had got a hold of it, and she just had it in the drawer. I was so upset with her, I didn't know what to do. So I grabbed the picture out the drawer and took it back home. And then I'd had it repaired, but the top part, you can't repair something because you can't see it. It's
Right.
not there. So we had to just kind of shave that top off when I did repair the art. But I was so frantic that it had almost been destroyed. Didn't because I'm a historic person. I'm a sentimental person. So that I knew that it had special meaning. I just didn't know what the meaning was going to be at the time.
Well, great save on your part. So where did the whole idea of the formation of the cover come from? Because certainly the face is front and center, but the whole thing is so nicely balanced. So how did you?
Well, I went through Four Wheels Book Club, and they did the cover. She took the photo and wanted to give it a vintage look. So that's how that turned out to be. And I loved it as soon as I saw it.
And I really want to bring up Pat's comment because I'm right there with you, Pat. Did you realize your mom was so active knocking down barriers that would change others when you were young? And I want to go on with that question in just a few minutes. So let's not forget it.
Of course, I didn't know that. I was too young to realize it. I didn't, I was so used to my mother being who she was, that it was no big deal to me. I was used to her being a poet, a great speaker. She could speak the socks off of you and get you to do anything. And my girlfriend was the one that brought it to my attention. Oh, I didn't know your mother was a poet. Wow. They were just so excited about this, the gift she had and the books that she had appeared in, her poems. Some of those poems in the book came from this anthology that came out for new poets. And so
Nice.
she was chosen, her poems were chosen to be in there. So I just wanted to capture all of that. And earlier, I was running for office back in the early 2000s in my community, and I needed some money. So I found all her works and I put everything together. I wrote a story behind them, and I took it to Kinko's and had them put it together with a spiral clasp. And I sold them to make money for my campaign.
Nice, nice. So how did you determine the actual sections of the book that, or your memoir that you released, the various chapter titles like The Apple and all of that, which is very different?
Well, it came from when I did the first when I did that first put together that first book that I did to run for election. I had sections, I had everything sectioned off, and I had a story behind each one. When I gave it to Four Wheels, and Nani did the editing on it, she knew what she wanted to do, so she changed some things around a little bit, and she decided she wanted me to emphasize that apple because I did have it in the story, but I had it as a chapter, but it was from my manuscript.
But clearly that was a great call because it does stand out beautifully. Your mama clearly worked hard raising a family of 8 children, while at the same time working to keep food on the table.
Yeah.
No easy feat back then by any stretch of the imagination. It's not even easy today.
No.
Your dad taught your mom to cook. Was she a good cook?
As far as I could tell, she was. She was a good cook to me. But yeah, because her cooking was all I knew, and there were certain dishes that she did very well at. So yeah, she turned out pretty good.
Did she teach you how to cook then? Because since she lacked it coming into her marriage, I would think that she might have shared those skills.
Well, you know what? She didn't actually teach us, but we used to stand around in the kitchen watching everything that she did. When she baked, when she cooked different things, I would watch her. And so when I started to do, the first thing I learned how to cook were grits with no lumps in them. I didn't want any lumps in the grits. And I learned how to do that because I was tired of eating grits with lumps in them. So that was my first dish that I could cook. And then I learned how, somehow I knew what to do with a turkey because I saw her cooking a turkey for years and years. And even though I didn't write anything down, when you see that enough, it gets into you. And so when I went to do this turkey, I said, where did I get this from? I'm doing this and I'm doing that. So she was teaching in her own way, but she never pushed us into the kitchen. She just never did that. She never said, come on in here, I want you to learn how to do this.
Interesting. She was probably having way too much fun doing it. Your mama clearly grew up during some really troubled times and went through a lot of strife. Is her writing your window into her thoughts about those times? Or
yeah, I was interpreting each of the articles for her when I wrote the first book, the little not unpublished book, it was just a printout, and I started interpreting what she did, and so that's in the book. Those interpretations, those italics, what's written in italics is what I was thinking she was writing it for.
Yeah, I thought that was a really, really nice touch. Do you also recall her talking with you and your siblings about some of the challenges of the era?
Well, she talked, I remember she talked about working for the Naval Air Base and putting screwing rivets in the airplanes, and I didn't know it was rivets. Thank you for bringing it to my attention, because I never paid any attention to that. I was just repeating what I thought I was hearing.
No, you did a great job. She was emulating Rosie the Riveter, and that was a task that many women helped support, along with other manufacturing tasks during the war, because all the men were gone.
Well, she didn't know she was doing anything great. None of us really knew. I just noticed as I went back to view her life, it dawned on me she was part of that, So I wanted to bring that out.
Yeah,
she's working to be proud of. She was working at the air base in Alameda, California, Alameda County, and it was a air base, naval base rather, and she met my father there. So she worked there. It was a job she got, and I remember her telling me they used to hoist her up into the engine, and then she would get inside and put the rivets in. So
that's a very, very small base. If you've ever been into any kind of that equipment, and John probably knows as well, that's some small space to get into.
Yeah.
So it must have been very petite.
She was very tiny.
So Shirley, if you think about it and everything that you've been doing, because you are pretty accomplished yourself at all the things you have done, do you feel your mama would be proud to know that you walked in her footsteps with your passion for justice and for writing?
I think she would be surprised, because I wasn't exhibiting anything but quiet. I was very quiet, very shy, wouldn't say anything. I wouldn't open my mouth to say anything. I think I came out in my first marriage. I came out of my shell from that experience. But my mother did all the talking. She was the loud figure. So I just stayed in the background and kept my mouth shut. But I was watching everything she was doing.
So Nani has a great comment in here and a good question as well. So Shirley, hang on, because it just scooted up. Shirley, you mentioned often that your dad was gone a lot of the time, and your mom was really your sole provider and caretaker for you and your siblings. When did your parents officially divorce? And was it when you were still a child?
No, I was grown, and I remember her calling me. I was at my job, and she called me and told me she was going to get a divorce. She was tired of she was separated from my father for so many years. So she figured, what the heck, why am I still here with this man? And I'm not even with him. He had another family, that he had been raising. So he was taking care of two families. And that happens a lot in the Black community, where the fathers have more than one family. And that happens a lot. That's a story that I need to delve into, because it really impacted the Black community. And there was a lot of alcoholism going on. My father was an alcoholic, but he was also a provider. He made sure we were taken care of as best he could. He fulfilled his obligations even when he was away from my mother. I remember him buying my sister and I some twin beds one year. And, I was grateful for that, because we needed a place to lie down in. And I didn't know it until my mother told me. She never tried to put him down or anything like that, even though they didn't get along.
Interesting. So my wonderful little audience, do we have any questions for Miss Shirley that you'd like to raise at this point? Don't be shy.
They're speechless.
Marion, did you want to say something or ask a question? Please unmute.
Yes. Well, I just, I'm exclusively a memoirist. So this story resonates with me. And in both of my memoirs, I've written about my mother. And I noticed that Shirley did not edit her writings to ensure authenticity. And my mother, by contrast, I'm very well educated. My mother probably made it through 6th grade, maybe 8th grade. And her writing was quite original. let's say. And I have a letter. The text of a letter is in my second memoir, and I didn't change much because it reveals who she is, and I think that's a great thing that you preserve the authenticity of her writings. Another thing I noticed is that your mother was kind-hearted. When it snowed, she delivered lunches. I guess you forgot your lunches when you went to school, and she walked half a mile in deep snow to deliver lunches. That was pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
And let's see, what else did I notice?
I
Oh,
think, Marion, that was back when they didn't have school lunches. And so you either got
no, that's true,
home and you
but she
starved.
could have skipped it, but she was kind-hearted about it.
Mhm.
But
I noticed,
she didn't want us to go hungry. So
no, she didn't. She has a mother's heart.
yeah.
Your mother, your grandmother died when when your mother was 4 years old.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of mortality back then compared to now, because we have antibiotics and other, better medical help. My own mother had a mother who died when she was 9.
Mhm.
She had TB, I believe. And
Well, that's what my grandmother had was
yeah,
TB.
exactly. Nobody dies of TB these days, or very few, because we have medical help. But I think my mother was deprived of her mother's love, and it showed in different ways. Now, as I look back as an adult, reviewing my childhood, I think the loss of the mother figure, and my mother was the oldest daughter in the family, so she had to function as a mother when she was 9 years old. So she never got the nurture in her teenage years. There was a stepmother that came in, but
Yeah.
it's not the same for sure. So bravo for writing all this. It's a legacy for your family, and also it fosters understanding of your own life when you review your mother's, for sure.
Yes, it
Well
does.
stated, Marion. Any other questions from our guests?
I see some comments in there.
There are lots of comments. Pat, you have a question? You want to unmute though, please.
Yes, I have a question. Shirley, first of all, I just want to say once again, I enjoyed reading your book.
Thank you.
It's very encouraging for every young person, young woman, even regardless.
Mhm.
It's an encouraging book that encourages people to not just sit back and accept everything, but to take what they have and do something about it, do something with it. And your mom did that. I really appreciate that. But my question is, because you mentioned the fact about a lot of Black males had 2 families.
Mhm.
And some had, and that was very popular also in the South, because of the fact that a lot of them live what we knew, what I grew up with knowing, common law marriages.
Yes.
Where they were not actually married, but they had been living together for so long, and the state of Georgia just allowed them to be known as married couples. You were brought up in Michigan. Was that the same way? Were the men actually married, legally married, or were they common law marriages?
I guess they did both. My father married my mother, but she never got a wedding ring, and that was a sore point for me growing up. My mother never had a wedding ring, but he gave her all these children. That's his legacy. But I had a problem with that. But I felt that in a negative way, I guess, knowing that this man had her and didn't give her a wedding ring, but yet they were married. And it was just, when I got married, I had a wedding ring. We went out and looked at the weddings. I was so grateful and thankful that I was going to get a ring. because of that, what happened to my mom.
And did you get a chance to know the children from the other woman?
No, and then I remember my father he used to take us out with him and go visit friends, and he'd take my sister and I out. And I remember going to this house, and this little boy came up to me and said, "That's my daddy." And I said, "That's my daddy." I remember that. I knew I didn't dare go back home and say that to my mother. I just knew that something was wrong with that. And I kept my mouth shut. But my daddy was taking us over to probably his other family's house. And I guess you thought we were too young to catch on to anything. Kids catch on to things real quick.
Oh, yeah.
And I caught on that something was wrong with that picture. And I never forgot it.
So Shirley, Nani asked a question that's very interesting, or makes a comment and question. And that is, it goes without saying that girls grow up to marry their dads, which means we marry men that are similar to our dads. Is your husband similar to your dad in any way?
Yes, he cooks, and I was grateful for that. But he also cleans house. He's a good provider. And we did everything together. My father, on the other hand, did everything for my mother. He did not give her an allowance. He went grocery shopping. He bought the groceries. He did the cooking. My husband and I did everything together. So my mother loved that about our relationship too, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
She loved that about him, because I guess she didn't have it in her marriage.
No, that makes perfect sense. Okay, any other questions, or we'll move on? All right. So, Shirley, did you include everything that you planned in this short memoir, or have you discovered other items since you published this book that you wish you'd included?
There were other things included, but we took them out. I was dwelling a little bit more on the legacy, the apples that fell from the tree, which included myself, my son, and doing a little story about him, and a little bit about the siblings and what their accomplishments were. But that didn't get in. That got put on the editing floor. So I didn't know. I guess I was going overboard. I don't know what it was, but there were things that were not put in.
Oh, I think it's a marvelous book. I mean, I finished. You're actually featured on my blog today. But your memoir is so personal and a beautiful tribute to your mama. Was it difficult to write, even for when you were doing it, to get some funds when you were running for office, or did you find it like almost cathartic?
It wasn't difficult at all. It just eased out of me when I saw all of her works. I said, I got to do this, and I got to put a little story behind it, or at least explain why she did certain things. And some of it I was just interpreting because I had no idea why she wrote it. I just know my mother, and she always wrote when she had issues or something was bothering her. So that's how that came about.
Are you the same way? Do you write when things bother you?
Not all the time. So sometimes but I used to. And then the computers came, and you don't always jump on the computer to write anything. You used to just sit down at your desk with a pen and paper and start writing stuff out. So I don't do that of late. That poem on the back of the book, I wrote that in a moment of sorrow and sadness. And I was very despondent when I wrote that poem. And I don't write poetry, but I wrote that during a moment of sadness.
So I'm glad that you wrote it, because it's a very moving poem. Can you, since some things were left on the editing floor, can you recall and share with us one of the best memories not in the book that you have of your mama?
Oh my goodness. It's hard to answer that for some reason. I can't. Let me think about that.
Well, we'll come back to that, and I don't want to put you on the spot. That was not my intention. I just figured one would pop to mind since you've been kind of saying some different things. So which one of your siblings would you say is most like your mama?
I think my sister Connie is a lot like my mother. In fact, she just wrote a children's book, and she's into children. She works with children, and she has a little bit of my mother's spunk. She looks like her a little bit. So that would be Connie.
So do we have any other questions from the audience?
Yes, Rox, could I jump in here and ask,
Please,
Shirley,
Mary.
were you
You're on.
close to your mom when you grew up?
Yes, I was. And I was a mama's girl, even though I was the oldest daughter in that family. I was the one that was close to my mother, and I was the one that was there for the end for her. And I was the one that took care of her. The rest of them left home and went on about their lives, but I was there for my mom.
I haven't read your book. I have it, but I haven't read it yet. And I just, from listening to this discussion, I had the sense that you were kind of the take charge child when it came to your mom.
Yes, I was the one that ended up taking care of her and having her come and live with me during her final years. After she first got diagnosed with cancer, that's when I first took her in. And then 5 years later, she was gone. But I didn't want her to worry about anything. And I didn't know the cancer was going to come back. So she stayed with me a little over 5 years.
Oh, bless you.
What?
I said, God bless you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I was her caretaker, and I made sure she got good care because she was at home. I had hospice care, and I had care that I could get through Medicare. She stayed at home to the end. I didn't want to put her in a nursing home or anything like that. I was not going to do that. Never.
That's excellent. I have a question.
Please.
And it has to deal with maybe some of that, Shirley. How were you emotionally affected while writing the book? How were your emotions? Did you find yourself sometimes experiencing strong emotions that you had to let out, maybe cry or anger?
When I first put out that little printed booklet, I think that's where a lot of my emotions were then, and that was how I ended up writing and setting up the book the way that I set it up then, because I was emotionally still attached to my mother, and I grieved. I didn't grieve very well. In fact, I suffered physically after she passed. I started getting ill from the stress of losing her, and started having my own health issues. And I finally worked through all of that and got through all of it. It's something else. And if those of you that have lost your parents, you know what it's like.
Yep, you'll never forget your parents.
Right.
Right. But I was going to say, because of the fact that I experienced some of that also, because I kept my mother at home. She died at home.
At home.
And I was in Germany, but I made sure I got back home 5 times during the time and I was there. And I had, and that impacts you. That's like an impaction of emotions. When she finally leaves, you're like, wow, you're lost.
Well, she was so strong for so many years. And when she got sick, it just tore me up because I had never seen my mother sick. It was very, very emotional. I was in the hospital when she came out of surgery, and she was all swollen up. And thank God I held my composure when I was in there talking to her. But I had to go out into the hallway, and I just lost it. You know, it was just awful.
Yeah.
No, you're 100% right. It is awful. And even Joy made a comment that, you know, she lost her mother in 1974 and is still extremely. I don't know that you're as grief stricken as you were, because sometimes those memories do soften a little bit, I think, Joy. But I know you miss her and you think of her and you recall everything you can.
Yes, you're quite right, Rox. I do still miss her very, very much. I won't talk too much now, otherwise I'll start again.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say.
I know. I'm feeling what you're feeling, Shirley. However, you know, it's life's rich pageant, isn't it? You know, we all have to go through these things, and it affects us all differently. But I think talking about it does help. Yes.
Yes, and losing my sister, you know, I haven't had any emotions behind that for some reason. I guess I'm still working through that.
Yes.
It's all very tough, and our hearts go out to you. So I know I kept my mother for her last 6 years as well, and took care of her, because of her going to a hospice or anything else was not something I wanted to do, and argued with my brother about that activity, because that he didn't think that I should do that. So.
Well, most of my siblings, I didn't have to worry about them because they didn't do anything. I was the one that took over my mother's care, or it wouldn't have happened. You know, it's just weird. You always have one, and I was the one.
Yes, that's true.
So we know that you have many more stories to tell. So on a new start, what should we expect from you in the pipeline of the next Shirley Harris Slaughter book?
I wanted to expand on my brother's story and put it into an actual book. It's an ebook, and I want to translate that into a book. And also this memoir, just for my family. It's not the kind of book that the whole world's going to go out and buy. It would just be something that a memento for my family and close friends to have a hard copy of this. So those are the things I'm kind of thinking of right now.
What a wonderful, wonderful target to hit. That's excellent. So Shirley, you celebrated your 9th anniversary with RRBC. You've been here almost since the very beginning.
Yeah. Yes. At the very beginning. A few months later, but I came in.
I'm glad that you've been keeping Nani on the straight and narrow. So how has your affiliation with RRBC shaped you as a writer? I'm sorry, Pat.
If it weren't for RRBC, I probably wouldn't have had the books I have written, except with that one book I wrote was on my own, the very first one. And my intent was not to go out and write books. I had something I had to say, although I had in my head wanting to do something about my brother, wanting to do something about my mother. I just didn't know what I wanted to do, and I didn't know how I was going to do it. And RRBC helped me to work through that. So they are a good partner to have when you are an lone author that no one knows you. She offers a beautiful platform for us to get the word out about our stories.
So would you feel that is the greatest benefit that authors or aspiring authors can gain from belonging to RRBC?
Of course I do. You just can't do anything without support. And I didn't see this kind of support outside of RRBC. And I belong to a writers club, and you were still pretty much on your own. We were just mumbling our way through that, you know, and every author was there trying to promote their book. you know, and we would do book events and things like that, but it was nothing like what you have here.
True.
God, we speak.
Together when we help support each other. I'm behind that 100%, Shirley. So friends, it is time to pay some bills. Nani? Nicely done. And I would have to agree, that is one book that will just pull at you and keep you really engaged. So I recommend it highly, along with Shirley's book. So Shirley, we are just about out of time. So once again, I want to thank you for being my guest today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's wonderful that you allowed us to get to know more about you and your mama via your latest release, Joyce Winifred HARRIS-BURKES, How I Remember My Mama. My studio audience, you make these shows extra special. So thank you for joining us here today as well. Remember, if you miss a live show, you can always find it, each and every episode, in the archives of the RRBC site. I'm your host, Rox Berkey, thanking you for joining us for another episode of Eyes on the Book, a Rave Waves production. Be sure to join us again for another episode of Rave Waves, where all things literary are our passion. We'll see you next time. Until then, keep your eyes on Joyce Winifred HARRIS-BURKES, How I Remember My Mama by Shirley Harris Slaughter. Bye.